The time is now 20 to 9. There is the Ministerial Code, which Nadeem Zahawi has been found to have breached, but there are also principles of public life, which apply to anyone elected or appointed to public office. MPs, civil servants, local government, the police and others. They include selflessness, integrity, objectivity, accountability, openness, honesty and leadership. The Conservative MP John Penrose resigned as Boris Johnson's anti-corruption czar last June, accusing the then Prime Minister of a fundamental breach of the Ministerial Code, for which he said that Boris Johnson should have resigned. And John Penrose is with us now. Good morning.
Good morning.
What do we learn then, now that Nadeem Zahawi has been sacked, about the way that this set of principles that govern our public life are working?
Well, I think the principles are right, and I'm really pleased to see that Rishi Sunak has reacted so strongly and I think fairly, but quite quickly in dealing with this. But I think that what we now need to do is to sort of upgrade our systems so that we can prevent more of this sort of thing happening in future. I mean, any organisation run by humans will be prone to human frailty, so we've got to have systems that work better. And there's a bunch of improvements to the way that not just Whitehall but local government and all sorts of other bits of public life work, which could probably just help us get that right more often in future.
Like what? What would you do to upgrade?
So, for example, there's an issue about transparency, about who meets who, so you can check what lobbying's going on. There's an issue about donors, to make sure that you can see the person behind a donation if it comes via a trust or via a company. There's a question about potential conflicts of interest for people going on to jobs after they leave government, both civil servants and political advisors and ministers, or even in some cases carrying on with jobs that they held before part-time while they're working for the state. So all of those things I think probably need to be tightened up and could be quite easily.
But the most powerful people, including someone like Nadeem Zahawi, who was at one point the Chancellor, it would appear perfectly possible for a man being appointed to oversee the tax system, as the Chancellor does, while being under investigation by the tax authorities himself. Yeah. That shouldn't be possible, should it? Well, but it was.
So, and I think that Sir Laurie Magnus's letter day before yesterday, who's the new ethics advisor, was very, very clear, saying this wasn't right and should have been declared but wasn't declared in the right way.
But why is it? But what I mean is that why does it rely on being declared?
So I think normally there wouldn't be an issue, because if someone missed something out which they should have declared, then the other side of the argument, if there's some sort of a quango that they're involved in that they should have declared and there might create a conflict of interest, normally that quango will be able to say, hang on a second, we think there's an issue here. The difficulty with tax affairs is they are rightly supposed to be private, and I think there might be a case here for revisiting the question for Treasury ministers to say, because the taxman, HMRC, can't say, hang on a second, we think there's an issue, because they're bound by confidentiality. Maybe there should be a slightly tougher regime for Treasury ministers in particular.
Hasn't Nadeem Zahawi breached the principles of public life as well as the Ministerial Code? Accountability, openness, honesty?
Well, so the ethics advisor, Sir Laurie Magnus, was very clear that he thought he had, and it was quite a long list. I think it's 7 different issues, and he was quite clear that it was both those things. I mean, it's very sad that Nadeem has ended up in this situation. I think he's enormously talented and there's a lot of affection for him, but I'm afraid it was pretty cut and dried at the end.
Well, but then if it's that cut and dried, why does he still retain the Conservative whip, and should he still retain the Conservative whip? Isn't that odd?
Well, hang on a second. He's just been sacked from cabinet and he's paid a whopping great big fine to the taxman. There's a further follow-up question about whether or not he wants to carry on in Parliament, but that's something which I don't think we should rush to.
That's something in between, isn't there? There's something in between, which is being in Parliament and still retaining because there are MPs who have the whip removed from them. If you've been found to make an untrue public statement in this way, why would you still retain the confidence of your party? Normally
the Conservative whip is because somebody has created a problem within Parliament. So it's things like allegations of bullying against staff and that sort of stuff. So normally that's a parliamentary thing rather than a ministerial thing, and constitutionally the two are quite different. But I just don't think having paid an enormous fine and just been sacked from the cabinet, we should rush to find other things to sort of heap on him at the moment. That those are two pretty huge penalties he's just been handed.
More widely, public appointments. One recent example that's in the spotlight is the appointment of the BBC chairman being reviewed. How would you upgrade and tighten up all of that? Because ultimately they are political appointments, recommendations by the government of the day, to important posts in public life that are important to everyone.
So one of the recommendations which I'm making, which I think would help, would be that you need to be a little bit tighter on public appointments. So that means that if someone is recommended for a top quango job of one kind or another, who hasn't been through the right approval process, and there's all sorts of vetting processes and civil service interview processes and that sort of stuff. If they go through that and they aren't being recommended, but they're still being proposed for the job, then there should be some sort of a check, probably by parliamentary select committees, to say, well, hang on a second, why are you still proceeding with this person when they weren't good enough and there are other people who might be better?
John Penrose, MP, thank you.
The time now is, of course,